And we're here. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good whatever it might be. Um, I'm Tad. I'm here. It's 7 p.m. Sunday here on the west coast of the California place. And you are with me. I am with you. We are all with us. So, going to read. Sorry, I'm still a bit baffled and battered. I had a long day today. Nothing negative. Lots of perfectly good things actually, but just got back home about 5:30 or so and had to lie down, take a little snack nap for a minute. Not anything to do with snacks, just having to do with the length of nap. So as a result, I'm drinking some coffee and trying to get lips, tongue, jaw, teeth, all that stuff working together in more or less the same way that it's supposed to. So you'll have to bear with me if I get a little fuzzy and hard to understand at some point. It's just lack of brain. That's all. Nothing really to worry about. Anything of interest to report? As I said last night, not really. Just dealing with life around here as usual. The constant ongoing weirdness of dogs and young people. I think I told you guys I've been trying to get rid of the damn Christmas tree since the beginning of January, and I dragged it out to the deck, waiting for people to take the ornaments off, and nobody ever took the ornaments off. So finally, Deb took pity on us and took off a bunch of the ornaments, and then I waited another couple of weeks, kept saying, "Can somebody please get the ornaments off the tree so we can take it down to the recycling?" Didn't happen, didn't happen, didn't happen. And I finally went out and got the last bits off myself and then threw it off the deck down to the garden below. And then dragged it across the property and now and ditched it in what is now the Christmas tree graveyard out at the far edge. So in generations to come, all the old dead Christmas trees are going to go there. Well, I figured what's going to happen if they recycle it? Maybe it gets turned into sawdust or just gets dumped in a landfill. This way, at least it'll be on the property here, and the bugs, the worms, the bacteria, the mushrooms, the whatever can break it down and put it to good use in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, I took all the other stuff off of it first, so there's nothing but old tree. I don't even know why I'm talking so much about this tree. It's just one of those things that like started to drive me crazy as it just got drier and drier, and I'd walk past and there's just more and more needles, and I'm going, that is a 3 or 4 alarm fire just waiting to happen. All we'd have, fortunately, nobody in the household smokes or anything, but there are occasionally people lighting candles and things, and I had these nightmare visions, so finally it had to go. So if a Christmas tree falls in the woods and no one is there to mourn it, does it make a sound? What sound would a mourning, sad Christmas tree make? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, so what else is there to talk about? Not much since I've seen you last. Just running through a lot of things, working on a lot of things. The forward progression has been held up a little bit the last several days because I've had hand and wrist problems. So I've been thinking rather than typing whenever possible. But God knows there's still lots to think about because I'm still finishing working on the Navigator's Children, the fourth book. And there's not really a lot else to tell. I don't have any other information on anything else that's coming out. I'm not hiding anything from you guys. I haven't had a chance to check on what's going on with that Otherland story, which I know is being published in the UK. I don't know if there's a American publication slated at the moment. That's the one called The Deathless Prince and the Peach Maiden. And but I don't have any information on that yet, which I was going to check on. I will have to give you guys an update on the beautiful reprint of the Dragonbone chair that's going on, but I don't have that information in front of me at the moment. But it looks like it's going to be really nice, really gorgeous collector's edition thing. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. So let me just check in and see who's here, who's already said hello. And then I can go ahead and start reading, I guess, because we've got a lot of stuff going on tonight in the section I'll be reading. So first off is, oh, Medardo, hello, senor. Good to see you. Hello, Tad and everyone. Oh my goodness. So I'm very sorry to hear about your doggies, but it sounds like they they were okay in the long run. Obviously, I'm an animal person too, and I completely get the worry. But it sounds like that they weren't lost for good. Just had to go to the vet overnight. So fingers crossed that everything is good there. And Medardo, good to see you. Bienvenido. Always glad to have you with me. Claudia, hello, Claudia. Good evening to you. And Kelly, good evening to you. A pleasure to see you. And Greg, same thing. Good evening, good evening. Kristen, hello. You're here. Well, good. I'm glad you're here. Steve, Mr. Gurr, good evening to you. Barban, a pleasure. And Barban also says hello to the listeners. Becca, good evening. And Emily, hello, hello. Nice to have you. And who else? Timothy, thank you for doing what you do. You're very welcome. I'm happy to be doing this. It's just my own small contribution to I don't know what I'm contributing to be honest with you. Andrew, well then, hello. Good to see you. I miss you. I hope you're well. Are you back in California these days, or that was the last I heard? But then we haven't talked in a while. Anyway, good to see you. Hello. Tim, hello, good evening, and lovely to see you. Jeremy, as always, a pleasure. Things are still pretty weird where you are because of the coronavirus. I am sorry to hear that. I just had to go visit my dad, who is currently in a nursing facility because of some stuff that he's going through and all of that. And I had to get COVID tested. And even though I had oh my God, that suddenly reminds me, I don't know where my COVID card is. I took it with me. I'm sure I brought it back. Anyway, so yeah, things are still weird. COVID is still weird. Dale, hello, Dale. Good to see you. And I think I've said hello to everybody who's on there. So that's all good. Let me think. Anything else? Yeah, my dad's been in the hospital the last week or so. I haven't talked about it online because there's not really much to talk about. He's dealing with medical issues. He is, of course, as you can guess from looking at me, he is getting on in years and dealing with a bunch of health problems. We are just waiting to get him back. He's in a place right now because he's on some new medication, and they want to make sure that he gets everything on time and all of that kind of stuff. But he basically probably is not having a thrilling time being there. My mom, of course, is not having a thrilling time having him gone. My brothers have bravely rallied around to, work on these various issues. You guys all know how this stuff goes. If you have family, especially, as people in your family have medical problems and stuff to be dealt with. So that's what I was off doing today, was going over the hill, as we say here, because for those of you who don't know, the part of the San Francisco Bay Area that I am in is on the coast, whereas the peninsula where I grew up and where my family, well, some of my family still lives, including my parents, is on the other side of the hills on the bay side. There's an ocean side and a bay side of what's called the peninsula. San Francisco is at the northernmost tip of the peninsula, and Silicon Valley is down kind of at the lower end of the peninsula. So anyway, so that's what I was doing today. Wasn't glossing over it or trying to hide it or anything. It's just that, we all deal with health crises in families. So that's where I'm at. And I think I've told you all there is to tell. It's been that kind of a week, just dealing with, the normal stuff that comes up, and not being able to do much actual typing. So I've spent a lot of time just sitting around thinking about the projects I'm working on. I was actually telling Those of you who weren't here last night, which I think is most of you, I was telling people last night that one of the things that's going on at the moment that's kind of interesting from a writing point of view is that since I haven't been able to physically spend much time typing because of these inflammatory issues, I have been, and because things have changed between the time that I wrote this part of the last book before, and now, I'm going back to it after having turned the first part of the book into the third volume. But anyway, so I'm basically trying to spend as much time just purely thinking as I can to save my wrists and hands. And as I'm doing so, I had come to realize that at a certain point, when you've got multiple storylines, plot lines, and multiple characters, and they're all kind of arranged all over the place. It's a bit like a strategy game. You put all these characters around who all have these different things they can do or can't do or would be likely to do, or or have such and such connections to other characters that would then cause them to do this, that, or the other thing. Anyway, so you wind up with these scattered group of protagonists and antagonists. And there's literally, if you have 20 different sort of little plot nodes like that, there are literally thousands of different ways that you could make things come together. I mean, honestly, they're just, it's an exponential progression of possibilities. And as a result, I've come to realize that there's only so much you can do just thinking, because one of the things that you have that comes about in the writing is that you actually start eliminating some of the possibilities. You make choices, and it's like the opposite of the multiple universe idea, where the multiple universe idea, the many universes idea is that when anything happens at a quantum level, anything that changes, that change spawns a new universe, one in which it has changed, one in which it hasn't. And what you're kind of doing when you're trying to write a complicated ending of a book is kind of the reverse of that. You're trying to take this almost infinite series of possibilities of things that could happen and make choices. And every time you make a choice, you're killing off a couple of branches, that like it could have gone this way, but if once I choose to do this, then all of those branches that would have jumped off from thing happening B, because you chose A instead, only the A possibilities go forward and the B possibilities wither and disappear. So I've come to realize I actually have to do some writing to solve some of these problems, because otherwise there's just too many possibilities. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think I was babbling about it last night, but it's an interesting discovery, because I'm used to not having enough time to think about all the possibilities. And so there's always been a part of me that's like, oh, if I only had like a month to sit around with this and just think of all the ways it could go. And I've come to realize that at a certain point that will make you crazy. It will absolutely drive you mad, because there are so many possibilities and so many ways you can juggle things to go together. So the writing part, the actual choices, are super important just to make the world or the story or whatever it is that you're doing into something manageable. Again, I hope that makes some kind of sense. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to reading Otherland. We are, of course, still reading in City of Golden Shadow, the first Otherland volume. And we're about halfway through, maybe a little stretch past halfway through. What's going on at the moment, of course, is Rini Sulaweo, and Kabu have made their first contact with somebody that they met through Dr. Van Bleek. Dr. Van Bleek, of course, was Rini's old teacher, who, after meeting with them and helping them to start looking at the mystery of this golden object, this city, that this virtual city picture that was given to them while they were in the evil virtual nightclub, Mr. J's. Anyway, Dr. Van Bleek, right after that, was attacked and badly beaten to the point where she died soon after, and was only able to confer a little bit with Rini, because she was so badly injured. And during the course of that, Rini has found two clues to go forward, and one of them is a hacker friend of Dr. Van Bleek's, named who goes under the whose last name is Singh, Singh, but has goes under the old hacker code name of Blue Dog Anchorite, and also that there was a researcher friend of the doctor's named Martine Derubin, and Rini has just made contact with Martine Derubin. They've had their first conversation. The and Martine Derubin says she's a researcher, but she's being very cagey and careful with Rini, and Rini has is not quite sure who this woman is and whether she can trust her, and clearly vice versa. So that's what's going on. And now Rini is at the Polytechnic with Kabu, and they they're. I think Rini asked Martine if she could help her get into Treehouse, which is where they think they can find Blue Dog Anchorite, but I'm not certain about that yet. Again, I'm trying to remember from 25 years ago what's going on in the story. So if that doesn't happen, don't hold it against me, please. Anyway, so they know there's some kind of a clue for the name Bolivar Atasco, and that's all the different things that they're working on at the moment. Okay. So yes, right, got it. So Kabu is actually asking her about Atasco and Treehouse. So let's start there, and I'll go back a paragraph or two. Okay. So Rini says, "What thing are you talking about?" That was the last thing she said. And this is now Kabu talking. "Treehouse, you said. All the references to this thing, this Blue Dog Anchorite man, pointed to Treehouse. But you never told me what Treehouse is. If you had spent more time gossiping with the other students instead of studying so much, you'd have heard all about it." Rini closed the Atasco files. She had the beginnings of a bad headache and couldn't stand looking at the compact text any longer. "It's an urban legend in the VR world, almost a myth, but it's real." Kabu's smile was slightly pained. "Are all myths false then?" She winced inwardly. "I didn't mean to imply anything. Sorry. It's been a bad day already, and it's just started. Besides, I'm not good on religion, Kabu." "You did not offend me, and I did not mean to cause you more upset." He patted her hand, a touch as light as the brush of a bird's wing. "But often I think that people believe things which can be measured are true, and things which cannot be measured are untrue things. What I read of science makes it even more sad, for that is what people point to as a truth. Yet science itself seems to say that all we can hope to find are patterns in things. But if that is true, why is one way of explaining a pattern worse than others? Is English inferior to Xhosa, or my native tongue, because it cannot express all the things they can?" Rini felt a vague sense of oppression, not because of her friend's words, but because of what seemed the increasing impossibility of understanding anything. Words and numbers and facts, the tools she had used to measure and manipulate her world, now seemed to have lost their sharp edges. "Kabu, my head's hurting, and I'm worried about Stephen. I can't really have a decent discussion about science and religion right now." "Of course." The little man nodded, watching as she pulled a pain blocker from her bag and swallowed it. "You look very unhappy, Rini. Is it just the quarantine?" "God, no, it's everything. We still don't have any answers or any way to bring my brother back, and the search just seems to get more complicated and more vague. If this were a detective story, you'd have a body and some blood stains and footprints in the garden. It's definitely a murder, and you've definitely got clues. But all we have here are things that seem a little strange, bits of information that might mean something. The more I think, the less sense it makes. She pushed at her temples with her fingers. It's like when you say a word too many times and suddenly it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just a word. That's how I'm feeling. Kabu pursed his lips. That is something like what I meant when I said I could no longer hear the sun. He looked around Rini's office. Perhaps you have been too long inside. That cannot help your mood. You came in early, you said. She shrugged. I wanted some privacy. I can't get that back in the shelter. Kabu's expression became impish. Not much different than my rooming house. My landlady was watching me eat this morning, very closely, but pretending not to do so. I think she has never seen anyone like me before. She is still not quite sure I'm human. So I told her the food was good, but I preferred to eat people. Kabu, you didn't, he chortled. Then I told her she need not worry, because my folk only ever eat the flesh of their enemies. After that, she offered me a second helping of rice, which she has never done before. Perhaps now she wishes to make sure my stomach will be full. I'm not entirely sure that city life is having a good effect on you. Kabu grinned at her, pleased that he had cheered her a little. Only when they have put great distance between themselves and their own histories can people convince themselves that those they consider primitive do not have a sense of humor. My father's family, living from meal to scant meal in the middle of the Kalahari, walking miles to find water, still loved jokes and funny stories. Our grandfather Mantis loves to play tricks on others, and it is often by such tricks that he defeats his enemies when his strength is not sufficient. Rini nodded. And most of the white settlers here thought the same thing about my ancestors, that we were either noble savages or dirty animals, but not normal people who told each other jokes. All people laugh. If there is ever a race that comes after us, as we came after the early race, then I expect they will have a sense of humor too. They'd better, Rini said sourly. The moment's diversion had not changed anything much. Her head still throbbed. She pulled a second pain blocker out of her desk and swallowed it. Then maybe they'll forgive us for what a mess we've made of things. Her friend examined her carefully. Rini, will we not have just as much privacy if we take your pad outside and receive the call from this Martine woman there? I suppose. Why? Because I think you truly have been inside for too long. Whatever your cities might resemble, we are not termites. We need to see the sky. She started to argue, then realized she didn't want to. Okay, meet me back here at lunchtime, and I still haven't answered your question about Treehouse. The small hill was bare, except for a thin mat of tangled grass and an acacia tree, in whose shade they were hiding from the high, strong sun. There was no wind. A yellowish murk hung over Durban. Treehouse is a holdover from the early days of the net, she said. An old-fashioned place where they can make their own rules, or at least that's what it's supposed to be. People who can go there don't talk about it much, so a lot of the information is inflated by rumors and wishful thinking. If they are old-fashioned, how can they keep this place hidden as you say they do? Kabu picked up a seed pod and rolled it in his fingers. He was squatting in his effortless manner, a pose that Rini found, as always, evocative of some dreamlike, distant past. Oh, their equipment and gear is up to date, believe me. More than up to date. These are people who have spent their entire lives on the net. Some of them practically built the thing in the early days. Maybe that's why they're so militant, because of guilt about how it's turned out. The tightness in her jaw and neck had loosened a little. Either the pain blocker or the open sky had done some good. In any case, the old-fashioned part is that a lot of these people were engineers and hackers and early users of the net. And they had an idea back then that the communications network spreading across the world was going to be a free and open place, somewhere that money and power didn't matter. No one would censor anyone else, and no one would be forced into conforming with what some corporation wanted. What happened? About what you'd expect. It was a naive idea, probably. Money has a way of changing things. People started to make more and more rules, and the net began to look like the rest of the so-called civilized world. Rini heard the lecturing rancor in her own voice and was surprised. Were Kabu's feelings about the city beginning to alter her? She looked out at the vast patchwork of buildings spread across Durban's hills and valleys like a colorful fungus. Suddenly it seemed almost sinister. She had always felt that industrial progress in Africa, a continent so exploited for the material gains of others and so long denied the benefits itself, was generally a good thing. But now she was not so sure. Anyway, the treehouse people took a kind of Noah's Ark approach. I guess you could say, well, not exactly. They didn't have any things they wanted to save, but they did have some ideas they wanted to hang on to. Anarchic stuff, mostly. Complete freedom of expression and so on. And some other ideas they wanted to keep out. So they created Treehouse and constructed it in such a way that it wasn't dependent on corporate or government sponsors. It's distributed over the machinery of its users with a lot of redundancy built in, so any number of them could drop out and Treehouse would still continue to exist. Why does it have that name? I don't really know. You should ask Martine. Maybe from logic trees or something? A lot of these things from the early days of the net have funny names. Lambda Mall comes from an early experiment in text-only VR. It sounds as though it would be a haven for criminals, as well as those who wish freedom. Kabu didn't sound as if he particularly disapproved. It is, I'm sure. The more freedom you give people to do good, the more freedom they have to do bad as well. Her pad beeped. Rini flipped it open. Bonjour. The voice, as previously, issued from a blacked-out screen. This is your friend from Toulouse. I'm calling as we arranged. Hello. Rini had her own video link operating, but it seemed politic to assume the other was not receiving either. I'm not alone. My friend Kabu is here. He was at Susan's with me, and he knows everything I know. Ah. Martine's pauses were becoming characteristic. You are outside somewhere, yes? So the Frenchwoman did have her own video on. It seemed obscurely unfair. Outside the Polytechnic where I work. This line is secure, but you must be careful not to be observed. Martine spoke briskly, not chiding, but stating facts. People can read lips, and there are many ways of bringing distant things close enough to see. Rini, a little embarrassed by having something that she had neglected pointed out to her, looked to Kabu, but he had his eyes closed, listening. I'll try not to move my lips too much. Or you could shield your mouth with your hand, so it is hard to see. This may sound extreme, Rini, but even if I did not understand your own problem to be serious, I have my own concerns. I've noticed. Her irritation escaped her control. What are we really doing here, Martine? Are we supposed to trust each other? What am I supposed to think of someone who won't even show her face? Sorry about the phone ringing. I forgot that was on next to my desk. What am I supposed to think about someone who won't even show her face? What good would that do you? I have my own reasons, Rini, and I do not owe you or anyone an explanation. But you trust me now? Martine's laugh was dourly amused. I trust no one, but I think you are what you say you are, and I have no reason to doubt your story. Rini looked at Kabu, who wore an odd, distracted expression. As if sensing her stare, he opened his eyes and gave a little shrug. Rini suppressed a sigh. Martine was right. There was nothing much at this point that either of them could do to prove good faith. She either needed to break off the connection or close her eyes, hold her nose, and jump. I think I need to get into treehouse, she said. The other woman was clearly caught off balance. What do you mean? Are you certain this line is safe? Certain. Any security risk would come from your end. Rini looked around. There was not a person in sight, but she still leaned close to the screen. I think I need to get into treehouse. Before she died, Susan gave me a message about an old hacker friend of hers. She seemed to think he had some information we could use. His name is Murat Sega Singh, but he also goes by Blue Dog Anchorite. I think I can find him through treehouse. And you wish me to help you get into there? What else can I do? A sudden upwelling of pain and anger forced her to measure her words. I'm just going forward the best I can. I can't think of any other way. I think my brother is as good as dead if I don't get some answers. And now I can't even... She took a shaky breath. I can't even get in to visit him. The mystery woman's voice was sympathetic. Entendu, Rini. I think I can help you to get in. Thank you. Oh, God, thank you. A part of her stood aside, disgusted with such pathetic gratitude. She still had no idea who this faceless woman was, but she was trusting her in a way she had trusted few others. She reached for firmer conversational footing. Did you find out anything about Atasco? Not much, I am afraid. He has no involvement that I can discover with the people who own the club you spoke of, Mr. J's, or anything else of significance on the net. He seems to keep a low profile. Rini shook her head. So we don't really know whether Atasco or his book have anything to do with anything. Kabu had pulled a piece of string from his pocket and constructed a sort of cat's cradle between his outstretched fingers. He was staring at it meditatively. No. We will hope that we can find out something useful from this man Singh. I will see what I can do about getting us into Treehouse. If I can arrange it, will you be available after work today? Rini remembered the meeting in the Chancellor's office. I have to do something after class, but I should be finished by 1700 hours my time. I will call you. And perhaps next time your friend will speak to me. Martine rang off. Kabu looked up from his string design to the blank screen, then back down again. Well? Rini asked. What did you think? Rini, you said once you would tell me what a ghost is. She closed her pad and turned to face him. A ghost? You mean the VR kind? Yes, you spoke of it but never explained. Well, it's a rumor. Not even that, a myth. She smiled wearily. Am I still allowed to say that? He nodded. Of course. Some people have claimed that if you spend enough time on the net, or if you die while you're online... She frowned.
This sounds very foolish. They say that sometimes people stay on the net after they're dead. But that is not possible. No, it's not possible. Why do you ask?
He moved his fingers, changing the string shape.
This woman, Martine, there is something unusual about her. I thought if a ghost was a kind of strange person on the net, and she was one, then I might understand better. But she is obviously not a dead person. Unusual? What do you mean? Lots of people don't want to show their faces, even if they're not quite as crazy about security as she is. There was something in the sound of her. Her voice. But voices can be distorted. You can't base anything on that. You remember when we went to the club and I made both our voices sound deeper?
Kabu shook his head in mild frustration.
I know, Rini, but something in the way she talked was unusual. And also the sound of the place where she was. She was in a room with very, very thick walls.
Rini shrugged.
She might be in some bomb-proof government building or something. I have no idea what she does besides spook around on the net. God, she had better be legitimate. She's my main hope right now. It might take months to get into Treehouse on our own. But how can you tell about the walls? Echoes, sounds. It is hard to explain.
He squinted, looking more childlike than ever.
When I lived in the desert, I was taught to hear the sounds of birds flying, of game moving across sand many miles away. We listen closely. I don't know anything about her. Maybe she's... No, I can't even imagine.
She stood up. Down below, she could see students returning to class.
I'll be back in the lab after my meeting. Let me know if you figure anything out.
Rini barely restrained the impulse to kick the office door off its hinges. As it was, the closing slam blew papers off her desk and almost knocked Kabu out of his chair.
I can't believe this! They've suspended me!
She was tempted to open the door and thump it closed again, just for something to do with the rage that was running through her like lava.
You have lost your job?
She brushed past him and flung herself down in her chair, then scrabbled out a cigarette.
Not completely. I'm on salary until my disciplinary hearing. Damn!
She flung the broken cigarette away and seized another.
I can't believe this. Shit. One thing after another.
Kabu reached out a hand as though to touch her, then pulled it back again.
Afraid he might lose a finger, she thought.
She did feel like biting someone.
If Chandler Bundazi had yelled at her, it would have been bearable, but the look of disappointment had been far more devastating. We have always thought a lot of you, Irene. That slow headshake, the small diplomatic frown. I know things have been difficult for you at home, but that's no excuse for this kind of bad judgment. Shit! She'd broken another cigarette. She took a little more care on the next. It's the equipment I borrowed. I didn't really have permission. And they found out that I fiddled the Chancellor's email.
She got the cigarette lit and inhaled. Her fingers were still trembling.
And some other things too. I haven't been very smart, I guess.
She was dry-eyed, but she felt like crying.
I can't believe this.
She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself.
Okay, come with me.
Kabu looked bewildered.
Where are we going? In for a penny, in for a pound. This is my last chance to use the Polly's equipment. We'll see if Martine comes up with anything.
You know, what was his name, was in the harness room, oblivious behind his headset as he swayed from side to side, waving his hands and jabbing at invisible objects.
Rini leaned hard on the interrupt button. He jerked the helmet off like it had caught fire. Oh, Rini! There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, evidence of gossip heard and gossip past. How are you? Get out, will you? I need the lab, and it's urgent. But, he smiled crookedly as though she had made a joke in poor taste. But I have all this 3 D work to do. She resisted the urge to scream, but just barely. Look, I've just been suspended. After this, you won't need to deal with me anymore. Now, be a nice man and get the hell out, will you? Yono picked up his belongings in a hurry. The door was closing behind him as Martine's call came in. The access path Martine gave them led to an area of the net Rini had never visited. A small commercial node as unlike the mass market flash of Lambda Mall as a broom closet was to an amusement park. The data bank at the end of the French woman's coordinates was of a very basic kind rented out to small businesses, the VR equivalent of the cheap modular storage centers in the real world of Durban outskirt. The databank's visual representation was as unprepossessingly functional as the unit it represented, a cube whose half-toned walls were covered with buttons and windows which activated and displayed the various services. Rini and Kabu hung in the center of the cube, their rudimentary sims made even more crude by the node's cut-rate rendering. This looks like the VR equivalent of a dark alley. Rini was in a foul mood. The day had already been hideously long. She had been suspended from her job, and her father had complained when she had phoned to say she'd be home late and he'd have to make his own supper. In fact, he had seemed more upset about that than the news about Stephen or her job. I hope Martine knows what she's doing. Martine also hopes so. Ah, you're here. Rini turned, then stared. Martine? A glossy blue sphere hung beside them. It is me. Are you ready to begin? Yes, but won't you find it difficult to work the interface? The blue sphere hung motionless. It is not necessary to use the virtual interface to get into Treehouse. It is perhaps easier not to, especially for someone like me who prefers other methods of manipulating data. But since you work with such environments, I thought you would be more comfortable entering it this way. It will certainly make the experience easier to handle when we reach Treehouse itself, since the VR interface works a little more slowly than other versions. Treehouse is very fast and confusing. Which still doesn't explain why her own sim is so weird looking, noted Rini. But if she doesn't want to tell me, I suppose that's her business. Several of the buttons on the databank interface flared as though they had been pressed, and data began to blur through the windows. She's not even using the VR interface, Rini realized. This billiard ball thing is just a marker, so we'll know she's here with us. She must be doing all this stuff directly from her keys or offline voice controls or something. Do you know why this place is called Treehouse? Martine asked. I told Gabu we should ask you that question. I don't know. Logic trees was my guess. It is not so complicated. Martine's laugh was derisive. It is very simple. They were boys. What? Who were? The people who first made Treehouse. Not all were male, of course, but most of them were. And they were making a place that was their very own. Like little boys who build a treehouse and have a club and do not let anyone else in. Like the old story of Peter Pan. And do you know how you get into Treehouse? Rini shook her head. You will appreciate the joke, perhaps. You have to find the ladder. As she spoke, one of the windows suddenly expanded until it covered an entire wall of the cube. The ladder can always be lowered, Martine continued, but the places where it will appear are always different. The people of Treehouse do not want to encourage people to try to hack their way in. Only those who have climbed the ladder before know how to find it. Kabu suddenly broke his silence. Then you have been to this treehouse? I have, but as a guest. I will tell you more, but now please remember we are in a public place. This is a real data bank, but with a connection to the ladder, or at least that is true today. If you returned to this node tomorrow, I doubt the connection would still be here. But in any case, someone could come through here with legitimate business at any time. Step through. Step through that window? Asked Rini. S'il vous plaît. Please. There is no danger on the other side. Rini moved her sim through the data window. Kabu followed her into a virtual space even less detailed than the one they had left, a larger cube of almost pure white. The window irised shut, leaving them alone in the featureless cube. The blue sphere had not accompanied them. Martine! I am here, said the bodiless voice. But where is your sim? I do not need any sim here. The bottom rung of the ladder, like Treehouse, is beyond the laws of the net. There is no requirement to be embodied. Rini remembered her friend's question about ghosts, and although it was perfectly reasonable that Martine should want to escape one of the petty rules of net life, she still felt a moment of unease. Do Kabu and I need to do anything? No. I have called in a favor, do you say? I have been allowed back in, and I am privileged to bring guests of my own. The white walls abruptly fell away, or rather, something different grew out of them. The empty space took on shape and depth. Trees, sky, and earth seemed to form themselves out of invisible atoms in a matter of seconds. Rini and Kabu stood before a leaf-scummed pond which was surrounded by a stand of oaks. Martine, if she was still present, was invisible. The sky, stretching limitlessly above the branches, was summer blue, and everything was suffused with a warm, buttery light. Near them, reclining between two large roots, his back against a tree trunk and his bare feet dangling in the water, was a small Caucasian boy. He wore overalls, a battered straw hat with a bent brim, and a sleepy, gap-toothed smile. I have permission to visit Treehouse, Martine said. The boy did not seem in the least surprised by her bodiless voice. He squinted at Rini and Kabu for a moment, then raised one of his hands in the air, as lazily as if he were reaching to pluck an apple. A rope ladder tumbled down out of the branches above him. His grin widened. Go on, said Martine. Kabu went first. Rini felt sure he would climb just as deftly in real life. She followed a little more slowly, overwhelmed by the day's experiences and half fearing whatever might happen next. Within moments, the pond and the woods were gone, and shadows had pulled in close around her. She was still climbing, but there was nothing to grip beneath her hands, and no feeling that she might fall. She stopped and waited. We have reached Treehouse, Martine announced. I am putting us on a private line running parallel to the main sound line. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to hear. Before Rini could ask what she meant, the darkness abruptly fell away on all sides, and the universe seemed to leap into chaos. An ear-splitting babel filled her ears. Music, snatches of speech in different languages, odd noises, as though she and her companions were trapped between channels on a shortwave radio. She lowered the overall volume on her system, reducing the noise to a cacophonous murmur. Kabu's voice came to her clearly on the Frenchwoman's private band. What sights you have brought to me, Rini! Look! She could not have done anything else. The visual environment that had blasted away the darkness was like nothing she had ever seen. There was no up and down. That was the first and most disorienting thing. The virtual structures of Treehouse connected with each other at every conceivable angle. Neither was there a horizon. The ragged mesh of building-like shapes stretched away in all directions. It was, Rini realized, like standing in the imaginary center of an Escher print. She could see empty blue that might be sky peeping from between some of the odd structures, but the color was just as likely to appear below the level of her feet as above her head. In other places, gaps were filled with rain clouds or swirls of snow. Many of the structures appeared to be virtual dwellings formed in every conceivable size and shape, towering, multicolored skyscrapers crossed like dueling swords, collections of pink bubbles, even a glowing orange mushroom the size of an aircraft hangar, complete with doors and windows. A few of these shifted and changed into something else even as she watched. There were people, too, or things that might have been people. It was difficult to tell, since the embodiment codes of the net had apparently been abandoned here. But there were other things, other moving things that barely fit the definition of object. Ripples of color, streaks of interference, whirling galaxies of pulsing spots. It's just crazy, she said. What is it all? It is whatever the people who belong here want it to be. Martine's voice, the source of irritation earlier, was now a sublimely familiar thing in a mad place. They have rejected rules. Kabu made a startled noise, and Rini turned. A floating tugboat, covered in leopard skin, had suddenly popped into existence beside him. A figure resembling a child's rag doll leaned out of the captain's cabin, examined them for a moment, then shouted something in a language Rini didn't understand. The tugboat vanished. What was that? Rini asked. I do not know. Her invisible companion sounded dryly amused. Someone stopping to look at the new arrivals? It is possible to have my system translate the languages spoken here, but it takes a great deal of processing power. A high-pitched screaming echoed above the muted babble on the earplugs, cresting, then dying off. Rini winced. How are we going to find anything here? This is insane. There are ways to operate in Treehouse, and it is not all like this, Martine assured her. We will find one of the quieter places. This is public, like a park. Go forward, and I will direct you. Rini and Kabu headed toward one of the gaps between the buildings, rising above a troop of dancing paisley mice, then swerving to avoid contact with something that looked like a huge tongue protruding from the sweating side of one of the structures. At Martine's urging, they sped up, and the bizarre tangle of shapes blurred. Despite their rapid progress, some things moved as fast as they did. Treehouse residents, Rini guessed, come to take a look at them. These curious folk appeared in such a strange and disturbing assortment of shapes and effects that after a while Rini could no longer bear to look at them. A burble of sound washed through the gaps between Martine's directions, some of them clearly greetings. Rini looked to Kabu, worried, but the little man Sim was gazing from side to side like any tourist new to the big city. He did not seem too upset. A giant red flower of a sort she did not recognize hung upside down before them, as big as a department store. They slowed at Martine's urging, then rose up into the petals from beneath. As the forest of crimson banners enfolded them, the babble in her earplugs dropped away. Writing flashed in the air before them as they drifted upward, a greeting in several languages. The English section read, "This is our property." All who enter remain here under our rules, which are whatever we decide they are at any given time. Most of them have to do with respecting other people. Permission to enter may be revoked without notice. Signed, the Ant Farm Collective. How can you have private property if this is all anarchy? Rini complained. Some anarchists. Martine laughed. You would fit in here very well, Rini. People sit and argue about such things for hours and hours. The inside of the flower, or the simulation connected to the simulation that looked like a flower, Rini reminded herself, was a vast grotto, honeycombed with passages and small open areas. The whole of it was covered floor to ceiling in velvety red, and the light came from no particular source. Rini thought it was rather like being in someone's intestine. Conventional Sims and their much less humanoid counterparts sat, stood, or drifted with no greater attention to up and down than those in what Martine had called the park. The roar of sound was more muted here, but clearly there were a lot of conversations going on. Martine? Is that you? I was so happy to hear from you. Kabu and Rini turned at the stranger's faintly accented voice, which came strong and clear across the private band. The bushman burst out laughing, and Rini was hard-pressed not to join him. The new arrival was a breakfast, a plate full of eggs and sausage, hovering in midair with silverware, cereal bowl, and a glass of orange juice orbiting around it like satellites. Are you laughing at my new sim? The breakfast bounced gently in mock despair. I'm shattered? Martine's disembodied voice was warm. Ali, it is good to meet you again. These are my guests. She did not use names. Rini, despite finding it hard to feel threatened by a floating meal, did not volunteer them. The breakfast quite visibly looked them up and down, examining their rudimentary sims for a long moment. For the first time ever in VR, Rini felt self-conscious about the quality of her appearance. Somebody must do something about what you're wearing, was the final verdict. That's not why we're here, Ali. But if they ever come back, I'm sure my friends will come to see you. Prince Ali von Always Laughing Puppets was one of the first truly great designers of simulated bodies, Martine explained. Was? Even his horror was arch. Was? Good God, am I forgotten already? But I've gone back to just being Ali, dearest. Nobody's doing those long names at the moment. My idea, of course. Still, I'm ever so honored you remembered. The plate slowly rotated. The sausages gleamed. Not that you've changed much. Martine, dear, I suppose you found the one way to avoid the entire fashion question entirely. Very minimal. And there is something to say for consistency. Ali could not entirely hide his disapproval. Well, what brings you here again? It's been so long. And what shall we do? They're going to have some horrible ethics discussion here at Ant Farm tonight. And frankly, I'd rather surrender to RL than endure that. But Signy Transitore is going to do a weather piece out of the conference center node. His things are always dreadfully interesting. Would your guests like to see that? What is a weather piece? Asked Kabu. Rini was relieved to hear that he sounded quite calm. She had been wondering how he was holding up under all this strangeness. Oh, it's weather. You know. You two must be African. So distinct, that accent. Do you know the Bingaru brothers? Those clever fellows who shut down the Kampala grid? They claim it was an accident, of course, but no one believes them. You must know them. Rini and Kabu had to admit they did not. It sounds lovely, Ali. Martine cut in. But we haven't come for entertainment. We need to find somebody, and I called you because you know everybody. Renee was glad her own sim didn't show much in the way of facial expressions. It would be difficult to keep a straight face. She had never seen a breakfast swell with pride before. I do, but of course I do. Who are you looking for? One of the older treehouse folk. His handle is the Blue Dog Anchorite. The plate slowed its rotation. The fork and spoon drooped a little. The dog? That old crust? My goodness, Martine, what would you want with him? Renee could not contain her eagerness. You know where to find him? I suppose. He's out in Cobweb Corner with the rest of his friends. Cobweb Corner? Martine sounded puzzled. That's just what we call it. Inside Founder's Hill with the other old people. Ali's tone suggested that even to speak of it was to risk it. My God, what is that? Kabu and Renee turned to follow what seemed to be the floating breakfast line of sight. Two bulky Caucasian men were gliding past, surrounded by a cloud of tiny yellow monkeys. One of the men was dressed like something out of an extremely stupid net flick, sword and chainmail and long Mongol mustache. Thank you, Ali, said Martine. We must go. It was lovely to meet you again. Thank you for answering my call. Ali was still apparently riveted by the newcomers. Heavens! I haven't seen anything like that in years. Someone should help them quickly. The assembly of flatware turned back to face them. Sorry, the price we pay for freedom. Some people will simply wear anything. So, you're running off just like that. Martine, dearest, I am absolutely destroyed. Ah, well, kiss. The fork and spoon did a complicated pirouette. Then the breakfast began to drift leisurely after the two burly men and the cloud of monkeys. Don't be strangers, he called back at them. And that's where we're going to stop, because it's now 8:02, and it's time. Anyway, so lovely to see you all. I don't think I got a chance to say hello to Jeff, who showed up. Hello, Jeff. Or Becky. I don't know if I got to say hello to Becky. And if not, I say it now. And meanwhile, I am also saying farewell, goodbye, nice to see you to all of you. And I am going to drag my tired old self back up the stairs and go see what just arrived at the front door, because I heard the dogs barking, and that probably means delivery. Food. So I send you all my very best wishes. I thank you for joining me. I will be back next Sunday at first 1 a.m. my time, and then again at this slot, 7 p.m. my time. Until then, take good care of yourselves. That's the first thing. Take good care of yourselves. Take good care of your family and loved ones. Those are not always obviously the same thing for everybody, but you take care of all those folk anyway. And anybody else that you see that needs a little help, it's not a bad idea to hand out a little help every now and then. It's a tough world sometimes, and these are tough times. So once again, thank you, good night, and peace. Love you all. Bye.